Evelyn Carter had spent most of her life believing that hard work solved everything. At 74 years old, she still woke up before sunrise, made her own coffee, watered the flowers on her porch, and balanced every dollar she spent in a small notebook she had carried for years. Anyone looking at her life from the outside would assume she was an ordinary retired widow, living on a modest pension. That assumption was exactly what Evelyn wanted people to believe. The truth was very different. 22 years earlier, after her husband Samuel died unexpectedly, Evelyn found herself alone with 2 children, a mortgage, and a mountain of uncertainty. Most people expected her to sell everything. Many assumed she would struggle. A few even predicted she would lose the house. Instead, Evelyn quietly built something remarkable. She invested carefully. She lived below her means. She bought small pieces of property when nobody else wanted them. She saved when others spent. Year after year, her wealth grew, not dramatically, not overnight, slowly, potently. Like a tree adding rings, by the time she turned 74, Evelyn was worth several $1,000,000. Almost nobody knew, not even her children, especially not her children. Because over the years, she had noticed something disturbing. The more people knew about money, the differently they behaved around it. Money revealed character. Sometimes it revealed character she wished she had never seen. Her son, Jason, was 48 years old and always seemed to be chasing the next big opportunity. Every conversation involved investments, startups, business plans, or financial shortcuts. Her daughter, Melissa, was 45 and obsessed with appearances, luxury handbags, stars clothes, social media photos, perfect vacations, perfect life, perfect image. Neither was a bad person, at least Evelyn didn't think so. But both had developed a dangerous relationship with money. One built his identity around making it, the other built her identity around spending it. For years Evelyn ignored the warning signs. Then came Thanksgiving. The holiday began normally. Family gathered around the dining table, turkey, laughter, stories, the grandchildren running through the house. Everything appeared perfect, until dinner ended. Evelyn walked toward the kitchen to get dessert. As she approached the hallway, she heard voices. Jason's voice, Melissa's voice. They didn't know she was nearby. She stopped, not intentionally. The first sentence froze her in place. The house alone has to be worth at least $2 million now. Melissa laughed. Probably more. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Jason continued. When Mom eventually passes, we should sell immediately. Eventually passes. The words landed like ice. Melissa agreed. No point keeping it. Their conversation continued. Property values, future inheritance, potential profits, tax implications. Not once did either mention their mother as a person. Only as an event, a future financial transaction. Evelyn stood motionless, listening, hurt, confused, heartbroken, because these weren't strangers. These were her children. The children she had sacrificed everything for. The children she still loved more than herself. That night she barely slept. The conversation replayed endlessly in her mind. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe, but deep down, she knew better. The problem wasn't the inheritance discussion. Every family eventually discusses inheritance. The problem was how comfortable they seemed doing it while she was still alive. The next few months only made things worse. Jason began asking unusual questions. Questions about her finances. Questions about insurance policies. Questions about property ownership. Questions that felt less like concern and more like research. Melissa wasn't much different. Whenever she visited, conversation somehow drifted toward money. Are you comfortable financially? Mom? Have you updated your will? What happens to the properties someday? The questions never stopped. Each one chipped away at something inside Evelyn. Then one afternoon she attended the funeral of an old friend named Margaret. After the service, several people gathered in the church hall. Coffee was served, stories were shared. Eventually the conversation shifted toward Margaret's children, according to several guests. The family began arguing about inheritance before the funeral even ended. One daughter demanded access to accounts. A son wanted the house appraised immediately. The entire situation became ugly, embarrassing, painful. Evelyn drove home feeling shaken. That evening she sat alone on her porch watching the sunset. The neighborhood was quiet. The air smelled like freshly cut grass. For a long time she simply thought. Then an idea entered her mind. A strange idea, a risky idea. An idea she couldn't stop thinking about. What if she tested them? Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, out of truth. What if she removed money from the equation? What if her children believed she had nothing? Would they still call? Would they still visit? Would they still care? The question haunted her. For weeks she wrestled with it. Part of her hated the idea. A mother shouldn't have to test her children. Another part believed she already knew the answer. Eventually curiosity won. 3 months later, Evelyn made her move. The opportunity arrived naturally. A local bank branch closed. Several accounts were transferred. During a family dinner, Evelyn casually mentioned that some investments had performed poorly. Jason immediately looked concerned. How poorly? Evelyn shrugged. Pretty poorly. Melissa frowned. What does that mean? Evelyn hesitated, then said the words that would change everything. It means most of my savings are gone. The reaction was immediate shock, concerned questions, lots of questions. Evelyn answered carefully, not enough to sound dramatic, not enough to sound suspicious, just enough. The following weeks she slowly expanded the story. A bad investment, unexpected losses, medical expenses, market downturns. One explanation after another. Nothing outrageous, nothing impossible, just believable enough. Soon the story took on a life of its own. Family members repeated it. Friends heard about it. Even distant relatives began mentioning it. Within 2 months, everyone seemed convinced that Evelyn Carter had lost nearly everything, and that's when the real test began. At first, the changes were subtle. Jason called less often. Melissa became busier. Visits became shorter. Excuses became more common. Evelyn noticed every detail, every missed phone call, every cancelled plan, every forgotten promise. Still, she hoped she was wrong. She wanted to be wrong. More than anything, she wanted this experiment to fail. Then came her 75th birthday, and what happened that day would reveal more about her family than she ever imagined possible.
Evelyn woke up early on the morning of her 75th birthday. For most of her life, birthdays had been family events, nothing extravagant, just laughter, food, and time together. She remembered birthdays when Jason and Melissa were children. Handmade cards, messy cakes, tiny presents wrapped with excitement. Back then, they couldn't wait to spend the day with her. Now she wasn't sure anyone remembered. The house felt unusually quiet. She made coffee, fed the birds outside, watered her flowers, then sat near the window waiting. 9 o'clock came and went, no calls. 10 o'clock, nothing. 11 o'clock, still nothing. By noon her phone finally rang. Jason, a small smile appeared on her face. Maybe she had been wrong, maybe. She answered immediately. Hello, sweetheart. Hey, Mum. His voice sounded distracted, bussy. Happy birthday. Thank you. A brief silence followed, then Jason spoke again. Listen, I can't make it today. The smile disappeared. Oh, something came up. Of course it did. Something always came up. That's okay. I'll stop by next week. She knew he wouldn't, not because he was cruel, because he rarely followed through anymore. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Afterward, Evelyn sat quietly, staring at the phone. 3 hours later, Melissa called. The conversation lasted even less time. A rushed birthday greeting, an excuse, a promise to celebrate later, another disappointment. By evening, nobody had visited, nobody had brought a cake. Nobody had shared dinner, nobody had shown up. The only knock on her door came at 7:30. When Evelyn opened it, she found her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Harris, an 81-year-old widow carrying a homemade pie. I figured someone should celebrate your birthday. Evelyn nearly cried. Not because of the pie, because the person who remembered wasn't family. That night she sat alone at the dining table, 1 candle, 1 slice of pie. One painful realization. The test was working, and she hated what it was revealing. Over the next several months, the distance grew. Jason stopped calling every week, then every month. Melissa became almost impossible to reach. Texts went unanswered. Voicemails returned days later. Sometimes not at all, yet something interesting happened. Whenever money entered the conversation, both suddenly became available, immediately available. One afternoon, Jason appeared unexpectedly. His first visit in nearly 6 weeks, Evelyn greeted him warmly. For a moment she felt hopeful. Perhaps he simply missed her, perhaps he wanted to spend time together. Then the conversation began. "Mom, have you thought about downsizing?" There it was, Agon. Evelyn hid her disappointment. "A little," Jason nodded enthusiastically. "You don't need this much space. The house, always the house. Always the asset. Never the memories, never the life built inside it." "What would happen if I sold it?" Evelyn asked. Jason tried to sound casual. "You could move somewhere smaller, and the rest, the money could help." Evelyn almost laughed. Money from a house he believed she owned, money from wealth he assumed was already disappearing. Even now, his mind remained focused on financial outcomes, not emotional ones, not family ones, financial ones. Several weeks later, Melissa visited. The pattern repeated itself. Different words, same conversation. "You should simplify your life, Mom." Simplify, such a pleasant word. A word people often used when discussing things that didn't belong to them. By winter, Evelyn's heart felt heavier than ever, not because she was angry, because she was grieving people who were still alive. Grieving relationships that once felt unbreakable. Then something unexpected happened. One icy January afternoon, Evelyn slipped while carrying groceries. The fall wasn't severe, but she injured her wrist. A neighbor helped her inside. The doctor recommended rest, nothing serious. Still, she needed assistance for a few days. Evelyn decided not to tell her children immediately. She wanted to see whether anyone noticed her absence. Whether anyone checked on her, whether anyone cared enough to ask. 3 days passed, nothing. 5 days, nothing. A full week, nothing. Not a single call, not a single visit, not a single message. The silence broke her heart. Finally, she contacted Jason. His reaction stunned her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn remained calm. "I thought you might call." Silence, long silence, because both understood what she meant. Jason changed the subject quickly. Too quickly. Guilt often does that. A month later, Evelyn attended a community fundraiser. During the event, she met a man named Arthur Bennett. Arthur was 78, a retired teacher, recently widowed, kind, funny. Thoughtful. Unlike many people, Arthur listened more than he talked. Their friendship developed naturally. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became long conversations. Long conversations became genuine companionship. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt understood. Arthur didn't care about her money. He didn't know about her properties. He didn't know about her investments. He simply enjoyed her company, and that made him rare, very rare. One afternoon they sat in a small cafe overlooking a lake. Arthur smiled. "You seem sad sometimes." Evelyn looked out the window. "Do I?" Yes, she considered denying it. Instead she told him the truth, not all of it. Just enough. "I think I'm learning who people really are." Arthur nodded. "And," Evelyn smiled sadly, "the lesson isn't pleasant." Arthur remained silent for a moment, then offered a piece of wisdom. "The people who value you only when you're useful aren't really valuing you." The words stayed with her. Weeks later, something happened that changed everything. Jason called unexpectedly. His voice sounded nervous, very nervous. "Mom, can we talk?" "Of course, it's important." Immediately, Evelyn sensed trouble. "What happened?" Jason hesitated, then finally said it. "My business is struggling." There it was, the real reason for the call, not concern. Need. Financial need. Evelyn listened quietly. The business faced debt, investors were leaving, cash flow had collapsed. The situation was serious. When he finished, Evelyn asked a simple question. "Why are you telling me this?" Jason hesitated. Then came the answer she expected. "I was hoping you could help." Evelyn closed her eyes. Years earlier, she would have written a check without hesitation. No questions asked, no conditions. But now everything felt different, because according to the story everyone believed, she was broke, and Jason knew it, yet somehow he was still asking. The contradiction fascinated her. "Jason," she said gently, "I thought you believed I lost most of my money." Silence, pure silence, a silence so revealing it almost hurt, because suddenly neither of them knew what to say, and for the first time, Evelyn began realizing that her experiment was about to uncover truths far bigger than she originally imagined. Truths that would eventually force her to make a decision capable of changing her entire family forever. And somewhere deep inside, she already knew that when the final choice arrived, not everyone was going to like it.
Jason didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched between them, long enough for Evelyn to understand everything. Finally, he cleared his throat. I know what I said before. Before. Such an interesting word. Because both of them knew exactly what before meant. Before he believed she had lost her money. Before he stopped calling regularly. But birthdays became phone calls instead of visits. Before excuses replaced effort. Evelyn remained calm. And Jason sounded uncomfortable. I just thought maybe you still had something. Something. Not, how are you, Mum? Not. Do you need anything? Just something money. Bestores. Help the familiar pattern. When the call ended, Evelyn sat quietly in her living room. The conversation bothered her more than she expected. Not because Jason needed help. Everyone needs help sometimes. What bothered her was the timing. The moment he needed something, she suddenly became important again. That realization hurt. A week later, Melissa called. At first, the conversation seemed normal. Then her daughter casually mentioned a vacation. A very expensive vacation, luxury hotels, private tours, Dunster shopping, the kind of trip most people only dreamed about. Evelyn smiled. Sounds expensive. Melissa laughed. It is. Then came the complaint. It is. Money was tight. Credit cards were growing. Expenses were increasing. Evelyn listened carefully, because once again the conversation somehow drifted toward finances. Almost every interaction now carried a financial undertone. And she was getting tired of pretending not to notice. Meanwhile, her friendship with Arthur continued growing. Their conversations became the brightest part of her week. Unlike everyone else, Arthur never asked questions about money. Never discussed inheritance. Never cared about assets. He talked about books, history, travel, family life. One afternoon they walked through a botanical garden together. Flowers surrounded them. Children laughed nearby. For a moment Evelyn felt young again, peaceful. Arthur looked at her. What are you thinking? She smiled. The truth? Always. Evelyn took a deep breath. Spent years worrying about whether people loved me. Arthur nodded. And now I'm wondering whether some people only loved what I could give them. Arthur didn't answer immediately. Then he spoke softly. The answer usually reveals itself. Evelyn knew he was right. The answer was already revealing itself. Every day, every phone call, every missed visit, every excuse. The test was nearly complete. Then something happened she never expected. 3 weeks later. Arthur suffered a mild heart attack. It wasn't severe. The doctors expected a full recovery, but the experience frightened him. Evelyn visited the hospital every day, sometimes twice a day. She brought books, coffee, conversation. Comfort. One afternoon, Arthur smiled weakly from his hospital bed. You know something? What? You've been here more than my own relatives. The comment hit Evelyn hard because she understood exactly how that felt. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Two older people, caring for each other while their families remained distant. Life worked in strange ways, very strange ways. When Arthur returned home, Evelyn continued helping him. She brought groceries, prepared meals, chatted on him. Not because she expected anything, because she cared. And suddenly, she noticed something important. Helping Arthur felt natural. Effortless, love often does, meanwhile. Helping her own children increasingly felt transactional. Months past, spring arrived. Then one morning, Evelyn received shocking news. A real estate company contacted her. The offer was enormous. One of her enveloped properties had skyrocketed in value. The company wanted to purchase immediately. The amount was staggering. Even by Evelyn's standards, several $1 million. She stared at the offer for nearly an hour. The sale would make her wealth far larger than even her children imagined. And that's when another idea entered her mind, a dangerous idea, a revealing idea. What if she pushed the test one step further? A week later, she hosted a family dinner. Jason arrived first, Melissa shortly after. Everyone gathered around the table. For a while the evening felt pleasant, normal. Then Evelyn cleared her throat. I have some news. Both children looked up. I've decided to sell one of my properties. Jason immediately leaned forward. Really? Melissa looked interested, very interested. Evelyn noticed the change instantly, the energy, the attention. The focus, money, had entered the conversation. and suddenly she had their complete interest. She continued carefully. The sale should help cover future expenses. Future expenses, a phrase deliberately chosen. Because she wanted them to believe she was still struggling financially. Jason nodded slowly. Melissa exchanged a glance with him. The look lasted only a second, but Evelyn saw it. And what she saw made her heart sink. Hope. Not concern, not relief. Hope, the kind people feel when they believe money might eventually become available. That night, after everyone left, Evelyn sat alone in her living room, thinking, reflecting. For nearly a year she had watched her children reveal themselves, not through dramatic betrayals, not through cruelty, through choices, small choices, repeated choices, the kind that quietly expose priorities. And she was beginning to realize something painful. Her children loved her. She truly believed that, but they had also become dependent on the idea of her money, dependent on a future inheritance. Dependent on resources they never earned. The realization broke her heart, because she knew what came next, a decision, a very big decision, one she had been avoiding for months. The following morning she called her attorney. Michael Reynolds, the same attorney who had managed several of her investments over the years. They scheduled a meeting. When she arrived, Michael greeted her warmly. "What can I do for you?" Evelyn sat down. "Young." Then took a long breath. "I need to change my will." Michael raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious decision." "I know." He studied her carefully. "Have you thought this through?" Evelyn nodded. For the first time in months, she felt completely certain. "I've never been more sure of anything." What she told him next would shock her entire family, and when the truth was finally revealed, the consequences would change all of their lives forever. Because Evelyn Carter wasn't planning to leave her fortune where everyone expected. Not even close. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered whether her children would finally understand what really mattered. Or whether they would lose everything chasing the very thing they wanted most.
When Evelyn left Michael Reynolds' office, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Relief. Not because the decision was easy, because it was finally made. For nearly a year she had watched her family change. She had listened, observed, waited, and now she understood something painful. Love and entitlement often look similar from a distance. Up close, they are very different. Over the next several months, Evelyn continued living exactly as before. The test remained in place. Everyone still believed she was nearly broke, everyone except her attorney, and now, for the first time, Arthur. One evening, they sat together on her porch watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange across the neighborhood. Arthur noticed something different about her. "You seem lighter." Evelyn smiled. "I am." "What changed?" She looked toward the horizon. "I stopped worrying about what people might think." Arthur nodded. That answer made perfect sense. The older people become, the more valuable peace seems. Unfortunately, peace didn't last long. 3 weeks later, Jason showed up unexpectedly. Agon. His expression looked troubled, very troubled. Evelyn invited him inside. They sat at the kitchen table. For several moments neither spoke. Finally Jason broke the silence. "My business is collapsing." Evelyn remained calm. "How bad?" Jason looked exhausted. "The bank wants repayment." Her heart softened immediately, because despite everything, he was still her son. The little boy she once carried on her shoulders, the teenager she comforted after failures, the man she loved unconditionally. "What are you going to do?" Jason rubbed his face. "I don't know." Then came the question. The question she had been expecting, the question she dreaded. "Mom, is there any chance you can help?" The room became quiet, painfully quiet, because according to everything he believed, she had almost no money left. And yet here he was, still asking, still hoping. Evelyn took a slow breath. "I wish I could." Disappointment immediately appeared on his face, not anger, disappointment, and somehow that hurt even more. Because for a brief moment she wondered whether he was disappointed about losing financial help, or disappointed about her situation. Deep down she already knew the answer. The next few months became increasingly difficult. Jason's business continued failing. Melissa's financial problems grew worse. Credit card debt mounted, expenses increased, and suddenly both children began discussing inheritance more openly than ever before. One afternoon, Evelyn accidentally overheard a conversation between them. They were sitting on her back patio. They assumed she was inside. "We need to convince her to sell." Jason sounded frustrated. Melissa agreed. "If she waits too long, there won't be enough left." Enough left, the words struck her like a punch. Enough left for whom? Not for medical care, not for comfort, not for her future, for theirs, always theirs. That evening Evelyn cried, not because of the money, because of disappointment. No parent wants to believe their children are measuring life through inheritance, yet that was exactly what seemed to be happening. A few weeks later, her health began changing. At first it was small things: fatigue, shortness of breath, dizziness. Then came the hospital visits, more tests, more appointments, more concerns. The doctors weren't alarmed, but they were cautious. At 75, caution mattered. News of her health immediately spread through the family, and suddenly something interesting happened. Jason started visiting weekly. Melissa called constantly. Concern seemed to appear from nowhere. The attention should have made Evelyn happy. Instead, it left her conflicted. Would they still be here if they truly believed she had nothing? She wasn't sure anymore. One evening, after another doctor's appointment, Arthur sat beside her in the living room. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, he looked at her. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Are you afraid?" Evelyn thought carefully. Then answered honestly. Not nodded. "Then what?" A tear formed in her eye. "I'm afraid my children will spend their lives chasing money and miss everything that actually matters." Arthur reached over and gently squeezed her hand. No speeches, no advice. Just understanding. The kind of understanding that comes from experience. Months passed. Then one autumn morning everything changed. Evelyn suffered a serious cardiac episode. The ambulance arrived quickly. Doctors stabilized her. But the situation was suddenly much more serious than before. When Jason reached the hospital, he looked terrified. Melissa cried almost immediately. For the first time in years, nobody mentioned finances. Nobody mentioned property. Nobody mentioned inheritance. Reality had arrived. Their mother might not live forever. The possibility hit them like a freight train. Over the next several days they remained at the hospital, taking turns waiting, praying, hoping, and during those long hours, something began changing inside them. Regret. The most painful emotion of all. Jason remembered missed birthdays, ignored calls, cancelled visits. Melissa remembered holidays she skipped, promises she never kept, moments she assumed would always be available later. Now later seemed uncertain. One afternoon Evelyn woke to find both children sitting quietly beside her bed. Neither was looking at a phone, neither was distracted. They were simply there, present. For the first time in a very long time, tears filled her eyes, not because she was sad, because this was all she ever wanted. Time, love, presence, nothing more. That evening she asked to speak privately with Michael Reynolds. The attorney arrived the following day. They talked for nearly an hour. When he finally left, his expression was serious, very serious, because Evelyn had given final instructions that would soon shock everyone. Including Jason, including Melissa, even Arthur, and when the truth eventually emerged, it wouldn't simply reveal who inherited her fortune, it would reveal the lesson she had spent an entire year trying to teach. A lesson about family, a lesson about love, a lesson about what truly matters when money is removed from the equation. The final chapter of Evelyn Carter's story was approaching, and none of them were prepared for what was coming next. The next morning, sunlight poured through Evelyn's hospital window. For a few moments she simply watched it, the golden light, the quiet room, the peaceful stillness. Life suddenly felt very simple. Not because her problems had disappeared, because she understood what truly mattered. Money had never hugged her. Money had never sat beside her hospital bed. Money had never comforted her during lonely nights. People did. Love did. Family did, or at least it was supposed to. Later that afternoon, Jason and Melissa arrived together. Both looked exhausted. Days of worry had changed them. They sat beside her bed. Neither knew exactly what to say. Finally, Jason spoke. "Mom,
His voice cracked. Evelyn turned toward him. Tears filled his eyes. "I haven't been the son you deserved." The room became silent. Melissa immediately began crying. Jason continued. "I kept thinking there would be more time." Evelyn reached for his hand. He squeezed it tightly, like a frightened child, the same way he had done decades earlier during thunderstorms. Melissa wiped her eyes. "I did the same thing." Her voice shook. "I always thought you'd be here." Evelyn smiled softly. "That's what children do." Both looked confused. She continued. "Do you spend your whole life believing your parents are permanent?" Neither argued. Because it was true, for most of their lives they had treated tomorrow like a guarantee. Now they understood it wasn't. Over the next week, Evelyn's condition stabilized slightly. The doctors became cautiously optimistic. But Evelyn knew something they didn't. She could feel her body growing tired, very tired. One evening she asked Jason and Melissa to come visit alone. No doctors, no nurses, no distractions, just family. When they arrived, she looked at them carefully, memorizing their faces, the way mothers do, the way mothers always do. "I need you both to promise me something." "Anything," Melissa whispered. Evelyn smiled. "Take care of each other." Jason lowered his head. Tears fell freely. "No matter what happens after I'm gone," she paused, "don't let money destroy your relationship." The words hit hard because all three understood exactly why she was saying them. Money had already damaged enough conversations, enough holidays, enough years. Jason nodded slowly. "I promise." Melissa nodded too. "I promise." Evelyn smiled. For the first time in a long time, she believed them. 3 weeks later, Evelyn Carter passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 75 years old. The news spread quickly. Neighbors cried. Friends mourned. Former co-workers shared stories. The church filled beyond capacity during her memorial service. 100 attended. Many people Jason and Melissa had never met approached them afterward. Again and again they heard the same thing. "Your mother helped me. Your mother changed my life. Your mother was the kindest person I ever knew." Each story felt like a gift, and each story revealed how much of her life they had never truly seen. A week later came the will reading. Jason arrived early. Melissa sat quietly beside him. Arthur attended as well. So did several representatives from charities Evelyn had supported. The atmosphere felt tense, not because people expected conflict. Because nobody knew what Evelyn had decided, Michael Reynolds entered carrying a thick folder. He greeted everyone, then opened the file. The room fell silent. The attorney began reading. The first section covered personal belongings, family photographs, jewelry, keepsakes, letters, items filled with memories. Then came charitable donations, large charitable donations, very large. Millions of dollars were designated to children's education programs, senior assistance organizations, community housing initiatives, scholarship funds. Jason blinked. Melissa looked shocked. Neither had realized the scale of Evelyn's wealth. Then Michael Reynolds continued. "The remainder of the estate will be distributed according to specific instructions left by Evelyn Carter." Everyone sat straighter. The room felt suddenly smaller. The attorney removed another document, then another, and another. The instructions were incredibly detailed, because Evelyn had planned everything carefully, very carefully. Michael adjusted his glasses, then began reading her final letter. "My dear children, if you are hearing this, then my test is finally over." Jason looked up sharply. Melissa frowned. "Test," the attorney continued. "Almost 2 years ago, I allowed you to believe that I had lost most of my money." The room became completely still. Jason's face turned pale. Melissa looked stunned. Michael Reynolds continued reading. "I was never broke. Not even close. In fact, my wealth increased during that period." Shock spread across the room. Arthur's eyes widened. Jason couldn't speak. Neither could Melissa. The letter continued. "I wanted to know something. Would I still matter if the money disappeared?" Tears formed instantly in Melissa's eyes because she already knew the answer. The next words hurt even more. "I wish I could say the results made me proud." Silence. Painful silence. Jason lowered his head. Melissa began crying. The letter continued. "You both spent less time with me. You called less, visited less, cared less, and although I know you loved me, Somewhere along the way, you began loving the future value of my life more than the present reality of it. No one moved, no one spoke. The truth was too heavy, too accurate, too painful. Then the tone of the letter changed. And so did everything else, but this is not a punishment. Jason looked up, tears covered his face. The attorney continued, because during my final months I saw something change. Everyone listened, carefully. You returned. You stayed, you remembered what mattered. Melissa covered her mouth, sobbing. You made mistakes, we all do, but I saw genuine regret. I saw growth. I saw my children becoming themselves again. The room filled with emotion. Even Michael Reynolds struggled to maintain composure. Then came the final revelation. The attorney opened the last page. Evelyn directed that her remaining estate be placed into a family trust. Everyone stared. A family trust? Michael continued. The trust cannot be accessed for luxury purchases, personal debt, vacations, or lifestyle expenses. Jason frowned. Melissa looked confused. The attorney kept reading. The funds may only be used for education, healthcare, starting legitimate businesses, charitable work, and future generations of the Carter family. The room sat in stunned silence. Then came the final sentence. The money will not improve your lifestyle. It will improve your lives. A tear rolled down Jason's cheek because suddenly he understood. His mother hadn't wanted revenge. She wanted transformation. She wasn't trying to take everything away. She was trying to give them something better, a future, a lesson, a second chance. The letter ended with one final paragraph. My greatest fear was never that you would lose my money. My greatest fear was that you would lose yourselves chasing it. If this letter helped prevent that, then every dollar I earned was worth it. I love you, Forver Mom. By the time Michael finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Jason cried openly. Melissa held his hand. For the first time in years, they weren't arguing, they weren't calculating, they weren't thinking about inheritance. They were thinking about their mother and everything she had tried to teach them. Months later, Jason shut down several risky ventures and started rebuilding his life honestly. Melissa sold many of the things she didn't need and began volunteering with one of the charities funded by the trust. Arthur became a close family friend. The family gathered more often, not because money brought them together, because loss reminded them what mattered, and every year on Evelyn's birthday they met at her old house. They shared stories. Lord cried, remembered. The house remained beautiful. The flowers still bloomed. The porch still caught the evening sunlight, and above the fireplace hung a framed photograph of Evelyn Carter, smiling warmly at the people she loved. Beneath it sat a small plaque containing the lesson she left behind. The richest people are not the ones who leave the most money behind. They are the ones who leave the most love behind, and that became the true inheritance, not the fortune, not the properties, not the trust, the love. The lesson, the family, because in the end, those were the only things worth passing on.